Hey, Kelly Uman. I titled this live Politics and Religion. So I'll talk about politics and religion, but my version of politics is not current politics, it's future politics. How can we change the world politically in the future? I want to eliminate Democratic and Republican talking points and the political agencies and stuff as well, and just talk about the issues. What do we all want in life, and how can we make it happen? So that's what I mean by politics. And religion is understanding that religion is false and doesn't exist, or it's not true. It does exist, it's just not true. So I'm waiting for a crowd to join, and that's what we're going to talk about. So politics and religion.
Click on the shares, you
But
guys. Share it out with at least 5 people.
yep, because we'll have a good conversation, especially if we can get some people that'll join and provide some talking points. I could just preach. I've got a ton of information. I could just preach, but and these two ladies here are smart too. We could just have a conversation with them, but
So I was
uh,
reading about oh, hold on, man. I have to go see what the name of it is real quick. I'm in the living room. I'm still reading that book.
Peter Peter was getting on my last freaking nerve today.
who's
Coach
Peter?
Peter,
Oh, Coach Peter.
Coach Peter, yes. Oh my god.
was
Well,
you in the
well, he
live
gets
with
on
him
my
or
nerves
something?
too.
No, I was watching Jeff, but I just he gaslights like crazy, and he's constantly telling Jeff, well, you're the only one that thinks that. Well, you're the only one that thinks that. No,
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
shit ton of people that think that way. But so that it makes me angry because he's intentionally trying to manipulate the people that are in the live, that Jeff is the only one that thinks that he's the crazy one. And
Yeah.
it is like typical gaslighting behavior, and it drives me nuts.
So Kim, that's the same live that me and Patrina were just in,
Yeah.
and so that's the same one. We were just in there for a couple hours, probably maybe 3 hours. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, I had left to go to the grocery store, so
Oh, okay.
But I guess after you left, we had a couple women showed up, and they were insufferable. Oh, not because all women are. These women are great, but those women were horrible. Oh, now we got the 295. Look, we got a crowd of people this time. 300
Got a
almost
boost.
now.
All right.
So what I want to talk about is what I typically talk about, but I want to start talking more and more about how to change our future, how to make the world a better place. That's what I'm calling politics. When I titled this live, I said religion and politics. So that's what I want to talk about is how we need to get rid of religion and how we need to change politics so we can make the world a better place. Yehuda,
Shalom Aleichem.
peace. What's on your mind?
Oh, I wasn't exactly sure what the content of the room was, but
So you just requested not knowing what we were talking about? Why? I would never do that. I don't know why people do that.
oh, I mean, if it's faith related, I mean, I'm fine having a discussion about that. I love speaking about religion and intertwining it with politics because I feel like a lot of times people try to differentiate the two, and I feel like that's impossible, personally.
Well, I think it's inappropriate to combine the two. So faith should be completely outside of all political decisions. Your faith should have no bearing at all on any political decisions because everybody has different faith. And when you're making political decisions, you're making decisions for people, not for individuals and what God they believe in or anything. So I'm assuming that you're Jewish based on your name. Are you
Yeah, yeah,
Jewish?
yeah. I'm a Jew. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So you believe that God really spoke to Moses and gave him
Yeah,
613
yeah,
laws?
I believe in what you would call the Old Testament. We call the Tanakh. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So what about Jesus? Do you think who do you think Jesus was?
No, I don't believe in Jesus. I believe ultimately he was either a false prophet or he was just a very misunderstood person. that unfortunately a lot of mythology was. That's basically what I look at the New Testament as. Similarly to the way that a Christian would look at the Quran or the Book of Mormon, that's how I see the New Testament in relation to the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh.
So why do you think the Tanakh is any different than the New Testament or the Quran? You think that they're just, people said, let's just create a religion. We'll write stories about miraculous things that happen. Why do you think the Tanakh is any different?
So that's a good question. The reason why, and you don't have to agree with this. I think that there's more credibility to the Torah itself, for one thing, because there's this idea called the Kuzari principle, because in the Torah it says that 600,000 men stood and heard God speak at Mount Sinai. That is the foundational evidence-based claim of the Torah. Right, Christians have.
That's not That's not evidence-based claim. That's a claim. I could say 50 billion gazillion people heard Klombadrov speak, and it doesn't make it true.
You were asking me in relation to other religions. Judaism would claim, like I said, you can disagree. What I'm saying is that Judaism would claim that relative to Christianity and Islam, which do not make claims like that on that grand scale. That's why we would say that Judaism has more validity relative to those religions. I'm not saying that it definitively proves everything in the Torah as being true. What I'm saying is relative to the other religions, because it makes a claim that was a mass revelation of people, and the other books don't have anything close to that, like the Quran or the New Testament.
Are you talking about the occasion when the people told Moses that they needed to go talk to God because they were too afraid to hear God's voice? That's what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you just think this is a true story because they said a whole bunch of people heard it. You think that's more valid than when the New Testament says 500 people saw the resurrected Jesus?
Yes, right, exactly. You were asking me why I thought it was more valid, and that would be my answer.
Right, just because it says a higher number of people heard God's voice instead of only 500 seeing the resurrected Jesus.
Statistically, right, a statistically significant higher number. 600,000 men, that doesn't include the women and children. It's estimated to be about 2 million at least. So that's the claims that we would say relative to the other ones. That's where it goes.
So do you think that it's okay to beat your slaves as long as they don't die as a direct result?
So you're asking about laws that are not. So, for example, we don't have slaves today because we don't really understand what that even meant. We don't understand that to be, for one thing, it's not a slave in the sense that, people would understand slaves today, and it's not a practice that's done today. So it's very hard to answer that question because it's not really practical.
But do you not think that if the God of the universe had laws that it would be applicable for all time? It was only applicable for the past?
I'll give an example. The way the Torah is written is it says there's going to be times when we're not able to, for example, do sacrifices. So it gives alternative means. Like, for example, in Leviticus chapter 26, it says that Israel will go into exile at some point. And at that point, how do you deal with sins? Christians would say you have to believe that Jesus died for your sins. But the Torah doesn't say that. The Torah says you confess your sins and you basically repent. That's what it says in Leviticus 26. Now, the Christian would say, no.
There's a lot of background noise, Yehuda. We can't hardly hear you.
Sorry. There's a train in the background. So yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that there are alternative means of dealing with certain things at certain times based on the state of the nation. So currently we can't do sacrifices. So we are trying to get to a point where we will be able to do that in the future. What
does the Torah say about what you should do when someone builds an idol in your holy land? What should you do?
Sorry, just a second. The train is passing. I'll speak in a second.
All right. This will be interesting to hear his response to this when the train goes by. So, Bobby, you said something like all the preterists are after our heads. What did we do? I mean, I don't know. I thought we had a pretty productive conversation in that live for several hours until this one particular woman got in there and got on my nerves, and I just left. All right, are you there, Yehuda?
Yeah, sorry. I apologize if another train comes. I don't really know when they come, but yeah.
So, what
So
does
yeah,
the
what
Torah
you're
say you should do when people build idols in the Holy Land?
I think in the whole, I know that idolatry is often understood in certain contexts to be certain contexts. There has to be witnesses. There has to be, so there can be a death penalty associated with that in certain
Well,
contexts.
without so when they worshipped idols, they were supposed to death penalty. But what should you do about the idols themselves? What should you do according to the
Oh, you
Torah?
get you get rid of the idols. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what is sitting on the Temple Mount right now?
Oh, I always forget which one it is. The Dome of the Rock. I think there's Al
It's
Aqsa.
Dome of the
There's the Dome
Rock,
of the
Al
Rock.
Aqsa Mosque.
Yeah,
I think that's the
yeah.
same thing. So
I
it's the
think they're
Muslim
two
temple.
separate things. I think they're two separate things because I sometimes say the wrong thing and Muslims correct me, and I don't really know which one.
Well,
They're
it's
in the same
called
vicinity. Yeah.
so it's the dome that's built on the rock, which is the holy rock, the holy Temple Mount. But it's called in Islam, and they call it the Al Aqsa Mosque. And so, what should the Israelites do if they respected their God and their holy land and their in the holy scriptures? You should be tearing that thing down. Why
So
don't you?
here's something. Here's something interesting. You're going to find this fascinating. According to many rabbinic opinions, Islam is not idolatry because they actually believe in the the idea of one God, right? So there really it's Christianity that you have more of a problem with idolatry. Islam, there's a very famous, sorry, there's a train, just a second.
So what he's saying is they don't need to tear down the Muslim mosque because they worship one God. So and it doesn't really surprise me because people always interpret the scriptures in a way that satisfies their own desires. So they don't want to go to war with the Muslims. So they say, well, let's interpret it in a way that says we don't have to do
Well,
that.
well, this is historically accurate. For example, the Rambam 1,000 years ago, and this is a famous, psak, a famous ruling. He says because of the persecution that was going on, right, from of Jews in Muslim countries, he said that if you're under duress, you're actually allowed to pray in a mosque. Not from the get go. You don't go out of your way to do it. But
Who
let's
said
say
that? Who said that?
the Rambam Maimonides. He was the most. He's probably the most famous rabbi of the middle, like of the. Have you heard of Maimonides, the Rambam?
I've heard of Maimonides, but I haven't studied him, so I'm not familiar with.
Right. So yeah, most people, if they've heard of a famous rabbi, it's from the past 1,000 years, they know who the
So
Rambam
what
is.
century is Maimonides in, or whatever?
He was in the Middle Ages. He was like
Okay.
literally like in like
So
around the.
so of course, so you believe that a rabbi in the Middle Ages can authoritatively interpret the holy word of God and how in whatever way he wants to, and that everybody has to believe the rabbi, or should you believe what God said in the
Well, no,
Torah?
but I am saying that. Well, here's the deal: is that there is an oral component to the Torah that is followed by rabbinic Jews and has been sourced at Moses, and there is in the Torah there is I can show you in Deuteronomy. There's a verse that gives certain authority to the judge and the priest of the time, for generation after generation. That's why you have books after the Torah where you have people, for example, King David, right? How was he anointed? It doesn't say in the Torah that King David is going to be the king of Israel, but because of the succession of prophecy, which is encompassed in the oral law, right? That's how we got this idea of, even the concept of the Messiah, which I'm sure you're familiar with, that comes from oral tradition. So all this idea is encompassed within not just the written Torah, but also the oral Torah.
Right. So let's get back to Jesus for a second, because you said he was either what did you say? He was either a crazy person, or you didn't even present.
Or
I
he
don't
was
think he
misunderstood.
existed at all.
I said, look, I don't know if he existed. I just for the sake of argument, I usually entertain the possibility that he did. I don't have a problem with you claiming that he didn't. Like it really doesn't
Well,
make a difference to me.
of course you don't, but I'm curious why people don't universally acknowledge this, because when you study, say, I was Christian for 40 years, and so I studied Christianity primarily. I mean, I studied the Hebrew scriptures too in support of Christianity, but now I realize that they're contradictory. But but when I realized that all the stories of Jesus in the New Testament are just literary retellings of Moses, or pulling scriptures out of their context from the Hebrew scriptures and just deliberately telling another story and saying, "Oh, you thought this was about Israel or whatever," like Isaiah 53. You thought this was about Israel suffering in Babylonian captivity. That's what the context tells you. But no, 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 no. This was really a secret prophecy about Jesus suffering on the cross. And
Right.
so,
You see that
uh,
over and over again in the way
right,
that Christians interpret scripture is they will use prophecies that are not exclusive to the Messiah, such as Isaiah 53, and then paint the target around the arrow and say, oh, who is this person? Who is this suffering person? And it's like, I can show you in Isaiah 49, verse 3. It says, you are my servant Israel, about whom I will boast. And it says, you be a light to the nations. Oh, no, that's the secret code word for Jesus. That's the
right.
true Israel.
And
I'm like,
so
come on, man.
Yehuda,
Like, you got it.
this is
Right.
this is
We're on the same
exactly
page on that.
why
Yeah.
this is why the Jews in particular should change their narrative and say that the way Jesus, everything that's told about Jesus in the New Testament is just a manipulation of our scriptures. So it's not that this person, it really did exist and these things were
Right.
pointing to him. It's that they got their whole Jesus idea from the Old Testament, and they just
Oh, of
pulled
course.
things out of context, changed their meaning, and
100%.
applied it to Jesus.
Oh, that's exactly. I have a whole YouTube channel devoted to this. This is what I do. Like this is, like yes, I've been doing this for years. And yes, you hit the nail on the head. All the New Testament is a distortion and a really just a complete like twisting of what it's taking this idea of the Messiah and almost like caricaturizing it, right? All the Messiah is a descendant of David who's going to rule as a king during an era of world peace at the end of days, which Jesus didn't fulfill any of those ideas.
Right.
So they make up this idea, oh, the Messiah has to be born of a virgin, the Messiah has to
and
be God, the Messiah, and all these silly things. He has to be born in Bethlehem.
well,
All this nonsense.
but even
right.
but even what you said, Yehuda, even what you said, that the Messiah is going to be a king who rules in a time of peace at the end of days. In order for you to say that about your own Hebrew scriptures, you have to piecemeal different scriptures together and come up with this narrative. There's not a consistent message throughout. There's not a single passage you could turn to that says that's what the Messiah is. The word Messiah, as I'm sure you're aware, is just a word that means anointed, and every king
Right.
and every
Right.
priest who was anointed to a position of authority was a Messiah.
Was a
So
Messiah,
this
in a
concept,
sense, yeah.
right,
Exactly.
this concept of having some holy man who is divine or whatever, who totally changes the whole world, that's completely foreign to the Hebrew scriptures. It's
So
only in the Greek. Go
Well, if
ahead.
you look at Hosea chapter 3, verses 4 and 5, this is my favorite messianic prophecy because it basically debunks everything that Christians claim about I say the Messiah because that's the colloquial term that we use, Mashiach, right? But we're really talking about a future Davidic king. That's why I phrased it that way. So it says, if you look at Hosea chapter 3, verse 4, it says, Israel will go many days without a priest, or without a king, without a sacrifice. And then it says, afterwards, they will return to the Lord their God and David their king, and they will come trembling to the Lord and his goodness at the end of days. Both Jews and Christians have to agree that David their king, who once again is mentioned distinct from the Lord their God, is the Messiah, son of David, according to what we both would believe, because that's the definition of what the Messiah is, a future Davidic king. So there's no way around it with that. And it doesn't say that the Messiah had to come. It doesn't say David, their king, is going to come before the destruction of the second temple and all the Jews are going to miss him and all the Gentiles are going to get it. and then he's going to come back, and then we're going to accept him. No, that's why I say if you want to find a true messianic prophecy that is no Christian or no sane Jew or Christian would deny is about the Messiah, it's Hosea chapter 3, Hosea, Hosea, EA, right?
Yeah.
Hosea
Yeah.
chapter 3, verses 4 and 5. It gives the timeline of David their king at the end of days, and it's mentioned distinct from the Lord their God. So that proves that the Messiah, David their
All
king,
right.
is not God. He's a separate.
So now let me
Yeah.
ask you. All right, let me ask you in relation to that. How is it that you can prove that anybody in the future is going to be a Davidic king because the Davidic line is completely lost?
I'm so glad you asked that question. So in Zechariah chapter 12, it says that all the nations of the world are going to attack Jerusalem because Jerusalem is going to be a stone of burden for all the world. And what are you seeing now? What is happening right before our eyes? And it says that at the end of this war, it says there's going to be horrible things that happen to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, but ultimately they will be saved. It says Judah will be saved. And it says the least, this is Zechariah chapter 12, verse 8. It says Judah is going to be saved, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem are going to be, the least of them will be like David. And it says the least of the house of David, which includes the Messiah, will be
Didn't that
like.
happen in 70 AD?
When did all of the nations of the world attack Jerusalem? And when did the house of David become like angels, like the angels of the Lord before it? It never happened. This is a future prophecy
Right.
that
So
will happen
Yehuda.
at the end of days.
So you've got to
Yeah.
hold up. You've got to deal with when you say something never happened. What is it? I think it's Isaiah 12, the last verse of Isaiah 12.
Zechariah.
I think.
No, no, you're talking
Where
about, I'm talking about Zechariah 12.
I know, but I'm
Zechariah
bringing up
chapter
something
12.
else.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
so at some point, I believe it's Isaiah 12. It could be Ezekiel 12. I think it's Ezekiel 12, where God rebukes people and says, "You're saying that this prophecy is for many days from
That's
now."
Ezekiel.
Ezekiel 12. And he says, "Hear what the Lord has to say. None of my prophecies will be delayed any longer, but when I speak it, it will be done." So, if you're saying that these prophecies, and if you do the same thing that you're accusing Christians of doing, is taking something out of context, reinterpreting it, and pushing it into the future, then you're violating your own scriptures. So, everything that you're quoting, Hosea and Zechariah, was about things that already happened in the past. They were written about things in the past. They were about the Babylonian captivity, the exile, the return to Jerusalem.
Here's what I would ask you. Ask a Christian, particularly about Zechariah 12, and ask them if it happened yet. I promise you, they will claim that it's a future prophecy about Jesus, because that's the infamous verse that says, "And I will pour upon my supplication, the spirit of grace and supplication upon the house of David," and they translate it as, "They will look to me whom they have pierced," right? So they claim that the person being pierced.
Right.
This is
and do you think
12,
it's
the same?
Do you think it's inappropriate of them to apply that to Jesus? Do you think that's inappropriate?
Yes.
Do
but
you?
Here's the deal.
Right.
Yes, and I'll explain.
So you're doing
exactly
the same thing.
Doing the same thing, Yehuda.
Listen. Who is the house of David? Is the Messiah son of David according to the scriptures of the house of David? Yes or no?
Is Jesus in the Bible from the lineage of David?
No, I'm not asking that. I'm asking, is the Messiah son of David of the house of David, according to the definition of what the Messiah son of David is supposed to be?
Yes.
Doesn't that make sense? Yes.
Yes.
So when you read Zechariah 12:10, it says, "I will pour upon a spirit of grace and supplication upon the house of David," right? That's who's being described here. So the Messiah is inclusive of that, correct? Right? So God is pouring his grace and supplication upon the Messiah and the rest of the house of David. And then it says, "And they," meaning the Messiah and the rest of the house of David, "will look to me," according to the Christian translation, "whom they have pierced." So according to the Christian translation, which is completely incorrect, the Messiah pierces God. That's how we know that the Christian interpretation of Zechariah 12:10 makes absolutely no sense. Because if you actually stick to the idea of the Messiah son of David being of the house of David, that translation literally, and that's how I could prove to you, without you even knowing a lick of Hebrew, that the Christians have no idea what they're talking about with regard
Right.
to
But I'm trying to
being
get you,
taken away.
Yehuda, I'm trying to get you to see that you're doing the exact same thing that the Christians are doing. They're
Yes,
just
you
taking the
are.
text, changing the meaning and applying it to their narrative. You're doing the exact same thing. You're taking something out of its context, something that was written in the distant past, that is written in what is supposedly Holy Scriptures that says, I will not delay my prophecies any longer. When I speak, I will fulfill it. And then you're disregarding God's commands
that's you.
and you're
That's you
pushing it off
taking that.
into the future.
So that verse in Ezekiel is you taking that out of context. You're claiming that that refers to literally everything ever, right?
It does.
Zechariah.
All prophecy.
Here's the deal. Zechariah lived
He says,
after
none of my
Ezekiel.
words. He didn't say these words will not be delayed. He says, none of my words will be delayed any
Listen,
longer.
Yeah,
but listen,
anything he
listen,
speaks from now
who lived,
on shall be fulfilled in the
so
time
who
that it's
lived first?
spoken.
Who lived first, Ezekiel or Zechariah?
Well, I don't think either one lived at all. I think those
Okay,
are
then we
fictional
can't.
characters.
Why are we having a discussion then if you're not going to respect the timeline of the tradition, right? If you're going to claim that I'm contradicting
So,
scripture and
so
you're going to
Yehuda,
Ezekiel and you're not going to
listen.
respect the chronology, then we can't
So
have a
Yehuda,
discussion. Does that make sense?
listen, Yehuda.
No,
Yehuda,
I'm asking you
if
if that makes sense, just to kind of like.
Is
I'm
anybody
asking
hearing
you to either
is
listen to what I'm
anybody
saying or I'm
hearing
going to drop you.
a bad feed from his mic
Yeah,
or something?
No,
we've
yeah.
we've
So
hit
I'm
the we've hit the end of the road.
Yeah, I don't think he's a very good listener.
Yeah, sunshine days. I'm letting somebody up.
How are
Oh,
you?
good. How are you, sunshine?
Good.
What's on your mind?
I'm a Christian,
Okay.
and I'm just listening. But so you don't think that? So basically, is it like the whole Bible? Do you think is kind of like made up, or like?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And historically too. Most like all of it.
Historically inaccurate, and
Okay.
completely untrustworthy. So the supernatural claims of the Bible are fictional stories. Even the historical claims of the Bible, most of them are not even historical events. There could be some events in there that are historical, but most of the Bible is not even historical. It's just mythology.
One that comes to mind is like Job. I would understand like that's not. I don't think that's supposed to be historic. Maybe some people believe it to be.
Right.
But
What about? Okay, so we're on
yeah,
the same page. You at least understand what I'm saying.
yeah, I know. Yeah,
That
yeah,
stories like Job is just mythology. It's a story. It's
right.
not
That's
about real
specific.
people.
Right. That's one that I would
But
agree with.
I would say the same thing about Adam and Eve in the garden. I'd say the same thing about Moses in the Exodus.
Oh.
And
Some
even
Christians would.
even
Even
Joshua and
Christians would.
Jericho.
Sorry. Even Christians would
So
even agree with you. I know a lot of Christians that don't believe in Adam and Eve and don't believe in. I guess they would probably not. I would see them not believing in like Moses parting the Red Sea and everything. So that's not a
right.
surprise, Yeah.
But I also believe that Jesus was not a real person. That he is just a story
Right.
that is completely made up. That there was no man named Jesus who was crucified in the 30s by Pontius Pilate. This is a fictional story.
And what was the biggest moment that caused you to believe that? Curious.
Well, so there was a bunch of moments, and I wrote a book about it. So I've got a book called Jesus
Yeah, I know you have a
Demigod.
book.
So I explain the extensive results of my research. But if I try to narrow
Like,
it
what would
down
be
to
like
one,
top three maybe?
all right.
That's all.
So
Yeah.
So the first thing that led me out of Christianity was understanding that the New Testament consistently teaches that the return of Jesus was going to be in the first century generation before those people died.
That's
This is
true.
what we call
That's
preterism. I
that's true.
became a preterist. And
Yeah,
so
they did
when
they love
Jesus,
that.
right, Jesus said in Matthew 16:28, assuredly I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. There's imminent language all throughout the New Testament, from Matthew to Revelation. It's all about repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand.
Yeah.
And these things are going to happen before you die. It's consistent all the way. The book of Revelation, the last chapter 22 of Revelation says, behold, he is coming quickly. Lord, come, Jesus, come, and it
Right.
says it 3 times that he is coming soon.
Right. In their
This is
lifetime. Yeah.
right. And so when I realized, so this is the answer to the question. Point number 1, when I realized that the New Testament had all that imminent language in it, that it was talking to them and not me,
Hmm.
2,000 years ago, I'm like, well, it's kind of irrational for me to think that it's talking about me. And this kind of could be point number two. When I realized, I kind of knew it, but you don't really think about what it means. When
Hmm.
I realized that the New Testament was written in Greek,
Hmm.
I'm like, well, this is a Greek story.
The
This is not a
Septuagint, I
Hebrew
think it
story.
was
It's a
called,
Greek
right?
story.
The Septuagint, was
No,
it?
the Septuagint is the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures that was
Right,
translated into Greek.
right,
The New Testament was originally Greek.
right.
So when you register that point that Jesus is constantly saying things were going to happen in that generation, and then you say this is a Greek story that was written originally in Greek, and then maybe point number three is that I realized that the New Testament was contradictory to the Old Testament, that they are actually reinterpreting it from a Greek perspective. And I want to give you point number four.
Okay.
Point number four is kind of tied to point number one and point number three, that in history, the Romans destroyed the Jews in war in 70 CE was when they destroyed the temple and Jerusalem, and they completely annihilated. They didn't completely eradicate Judaism from the world, but they completely destroyed the Jews in war in 70 CE. And I found no evidence of Christianity prior to 70 CE, but all the evidence for Christianity comes after the war. And so when I saw that
Where did you put
the
where?
New Testament is wartime, huh?
Like where is that? Because isn't it true that the Roman Empire fell like after Christ was crucified, and then you know I don't know the time frame of it, but then
Well,
eventually,
the Western Roman Empire fell like in the 400s or something like that in the 5th century. But then you had the Eastern Roman Empire, centered in Constantinople, called the Byzantine Empire, and that lasted another 1,000 years. So,
so
uh,
you're saying the artifacts and the quote unquote I'll say evidence of Jesus started after or beginning 70 CE?
so there's no artifacts, there's no archaeological evidence for Jesus, none whatsoever. I mean, there's no
Well,
scientific evidence
I
for
think
Jesus.
I think you don't take it as one, but the one where um they spoke of Jesus being crucified, and they said that someone of a Jewish leader was crucified. But I think I heard you say that you don't think that was accurate. Um,
So if you're
a
talking
Roman,
about
I think it was a Roman.
Josephus,
Yeah.
so you might be talking about Josephus. Josephus is so this is another critical moment that I talk about in the book, and so maybe we're at point number five or something now. When I found out that the earliest, most logical reference to this Jesus character in history comes from Josephus, who was a Jewish, prominent Jewish leader and general of the war in 70 CE. Supposedly, I'm not sure I trust that even, but that's the narrative. Uh, and he only made one definitive reference to the biblical Jesus. But when you study that, all scholars acknowledge that this is not original to Josephus. So everybody knows that Christians, at the very least, Christians went in and did some doctoring of Josephus and said, "Nah, we need to jazz this up and provide some support for Jesus."
Well,
So
why do you think they
that
would
tells
make
me that they had to add Jesus to history, and that's a big
so why would they do that?
no.
What do you think is the reason then? Because so during that time, obviously, some people, not everybody, but some, it was harder to be able to read, write, and probably expensive to get the supplies to do, like, even create whatever, a journal or something to write on. So, what about just the personal stories that we would find in the New Testament and things that aren't there now that were taken out? Um, how the Bible has changed and everything, but like what would be their purpose of creating this Jesus person during that time when it was even difficult to put pen to paper or whatever they had? You know what I
So
mean? What was their
so are you
reason?
talking about why would they change Josephus or why would they
Just
create
no, I'm
Jesus?
just saying in general, like why would so many Christians during that time, whether it's Jew to Christian or Gentile to Christian, what would cause them to, have experiences, write them down that were incorporated into the New Testament or eventually taken out, but
Right.
like
So
writings of Jesus? What would
right.
cause
So
that?
I think I understand your question. And so when you said either Jew to Christian or Gentile to Christian, if you go look for historical records, the Jews were actively fighting to preserve Judaism. They were eradicated and defeated in war. All the early Christians were Romans,
No.
Gentiles. This was
No, because
There's
the
no
correct
Jewish
phrase, I
Christians.
guess, would be Messianic Jew. Then, like a Messianic Jew would be someone who is truly like the first Christian who they were Jewish, and they still, abided by the
Ev-
laws as much as they could. But they also,
everybody who believed in Jesus in the second, third centuries and beyond, they were all Gentiles.
no.
There were no
Well,
Jewish.
Yeah.
There were no
so
Jewish
okay, wait,
converts to
so I'll
Christianity.
accept that, we'll disagree on that. But then why would they even create? So then who or what would be the purpose of creating this story of Jesus then? Like, why
Uh,
would they?
so this is a critical question, and I have your answer. So why did they create? If Christianity is false, why did they do it? So
Right.
here's the reason: the Jews revolted against Rome because they wanted to be independent. They actually thought that God gave them Israel and they should be independent of all their oppressors, and so
Right.
they actually revolted. They didn't want to pay taxes to
Right.
Rome,
Right.
and so
But wouldn't
this
they
is
want to
what
stay
caused
Jewish?
the war.
Wouldn't they want to be Jewish? They wouldn't want to change their religion.
Correct.
Right.
That's why they went to war. They fought to the death because they wanted to stay Jews. But
Right.
that was a problem for the Romans because the Romans wanted them to submit to their authority and to pay taxes. They said,
Right.
they said, as long as your religion doesn't spark a rebellion, if you'll worship if you'll pay homage to the emperor and pay taxes and submit to our authority, then we'll let you do what you want to do. But the Jews did not want to comply. The Jews wanted to revolt and they wanted independence. So their religion actually motivated them to rebel against Rome. So Rome obviously didn't like this. Rome came down, squashed the Jews, and then they found out that what motivated their rebellion was their religion. So the Jews thought that God would send them a Messiah to lead them to victory in war over Rome. So the Romans had to come up with something to destroy this ideology of God supporting Jewish revolts. So they created Christianity and said,
Because they
"No,
saw the
guys,
cross. Remember that? Do you know that's where
yeah.
you probably Yeah,
Well,
you know
I
what
can.
I'm saying.
Remind
That
me
doesn't mean
to
it's real. It doesn't
talk
mean
about Constantine's cross. I
right.
can disprove
Right,
that
right.
too.
No, yeah, I know. Yeah. But I want to say, shoot, what was I gonna say? But yeah, Constantine saw that. Oh yeah, I wanted to say this. So, what do you think of Saul or Paul? Like, do you believe he existed?
Didn't
You don't
exist.
believe he
He's
existed?
not a historical person.
Hmm. But then
So,
I could say the same thing about anybody who ever existed during that time that wasn't.
no, you can't.
I can,
No,
right?
because multiple
Using
people
your
attested.
theory, using
So
what you're
listen.
saying.
No, listen, Sunshine. Let me explain it.
Okay.
So there were multiple people that attested to Julius Caesar and Augustus and Tiberius and Caligula and Claudius. These people were multiply attested by many different people. So we have a very good confidence level that we know the names of the Caesars of Rome.
So
Paul doesn't
Paul
even.
wasn't written about?
No, not at all. Not a single historical record about Paul anywhere in the world.
Really?
Correct.
I have
And
to look into that, but
so
I
listen.
believe it.
So I was shocked when I asked a scholar on TikTok named Candida Moss. I said, "Is there any historical reference to Paul or Saul of Tarsus?" She said, "No, there is no historical record, but that doesn't mean he doesn't exist." I said, "Of course, that alone doesn't mean he didn't exist, but it is pretty bad evidence that he did exist. You sure can't
Right.
say he did exist because we don't have any evidence of him." So
Right.
Josephus should have written. Josephus would have been a contemporary with Paul or Saul of Tarsus, and Josephus doesn't say a single word
No, that's not
about
true.
some Saul of
No,
Tarsus.
he was supposed to be separate from them, but he was what, like a political leader or some, like he was in government, right?
Who?
Josephus.
Josephus was a Pharisee in
Right.
Jerusalem
But he
who
wouldn't
was a
be
general
connected
of the
with
army.
Yeah, so he wouldn't be like writing with Paul or Saul. Like is that what you just said?
Well, so when you read Josephus, it tells a story about how Josephus was on a boat carrying Jews to Rome to defend their case before Nero, and then the boat wrecked. There was a shipwreck. And
Hmm.
so in the book of Acts, Acts says Paul was on a boat to Rome to defend his case before Nero, and his boat wrecked. So
Oh,
it
they're supposed to
now
be like in
there
the
could
same place.
that could have happened more than once. There could have been two different boats that wrecked on the way to carry Jews to defend their case before Nero, but that's more unlikely than saying that if these stories are true, then they should have been on the same boat. And it says that he was actually going with these Jews to defend their case before Caesar, so he should have known Paul. He would have been on the same boat with this guy, and
Well,
he didn't
during that
say a single
time,
word about it.
during that time, according to the stories, like Jews, they didn't like Paul. The Christians that were connected with Jesus, they thought Paul was annoying and horrible because Paul, according to the stories, he used to unalive Christians, and then he turned. So
Right.
maybe
But
he
there's
was in
no
the same
historical
boat,
evidence of that.
right?
So,
But
so
I'm
what's
just saying according
important?
to the stories.
Right, right. So when you want to find out if these stories are true or not, you can't just say, "Well, I'm going to believe the story because I just believe the story."
But
If you
that
want
doesn't
to find
really.
out if the stories are true, then you need to corroborate them with some other historical
No,
record,
I totally
and you
get it.
can't.
No, of course, I understand that, and after this, I'm gonna like look into if there was even a Paul or Saul, like despite or besides the New Testament. But even that example right there, that doesn't really prove that they should have like corroborated together, with the boat thing. I
Right.
because I look at
So,
Josephus as an outsider who wrote about Jesus, so that's what makes it historic, is because he's a known figure. He wrote about this.
but Josephus didn't write about Jesus. That's the problem.
Then who do you write about? I mean, well, like, what does he exactly say?
Christians added Jesus to Josephus. Christians had to add Jesus to Josephus.
How do you prove it though?
All scholars know that
Really?
Yeah,
Like
the
they're
Testimonium
saying,
yeah,
Flavianum.
yeah.
okay,
They say that.
It's not
okay,
even contested.
okay. So it's like saying it's edited. What he wrote was edited
Right.
to. Okay.
So what a lot of scholars, and I think even the majority of scholars would say, there probably was a mention of Jesus, and somebody came along later and just expanded it. But that doesn't make any sense, because first of all, there's no evidence that there was a hint of it. The earliest manuscript of Josephus we have comes from the 11th century, so that's 1,000 years. We don't have 1,000 years of information about what Josephus actually wrote. We have a 1,000-year-old copy. So
Hmm.
you can't assume that he wrote about Jesus. But when you look at what is said about Jesus in the Testimonium, and Eusebius even quoted it in the 4th century. So the earliest quotation or citation we have is from Eusebius, who was working under Constantine, who was actively trying to make Christianity the world religion. Uh, and so it's purely something that only a Christian would say, that he was a superhuman who resurrected from the dead and only taught the truth to those who love the truth, and fulfilled 10,000 prophecies. This is only something a Christian would say. So it doesn't make sense to just introduce a character without actually saying anything about him. Uh, and
So you basically what you're saying is they created it so then, um, or the Romans created it so then they could take power and they could conquer. I
Well,
guess.
to end, it was to destroy the Jewish idea that God would send a Messiah to revolt against Rome. That's the idea that Christianity squashed. That the
Right.
Romans or the Jews should not ever rebel against Rome again. So they
Okay.
weren't trying to convert the Jews. They were telling the Jews
It's over.
that you will either believe in Jesus or die. This is why Jesus says in the Bible, "Repent or perish." And I'm only talking to the Jews.
Uh-huh.
Jesus said in the Bible, "I was only sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel,"
You're
and he
right.
told them that they were going to taste the wrath of God if they didn't repent.
Right.
And so Jesus is actually representing the Roman narrative for the Jews to stop revolting, or else they would be destroyed by God.
Hmm. And then until he heals the Gentile is when we open it up to possibly he was here for all of us. But so basically, let's say you're right, and like for my brain, right? There's no other stories of Jesus except for the Bible. If we look at the Bible as just then personal stories, So you're saying each story of Jesus, the things that he said, the things about him, they're all fictitious. You know, the whole New Testament is made up, kind of thing.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And we can know, so we can
For
test
me, it's
and know
not. I'm
that
not.
that
For
it's
those
not true.
watching, I'm not. I hope like no one thinks that I'm agreeing, but I'm understanding your side.
So I appreciate what you're doing. Whether you agree with me or not, Sunshine, you're at least asking questions. As you're listening to what I'm saying, you're trying to understand what I'm saying. This is extremely rare to have anybody that's saying, what are you saying and why are you saying it? And you're actually listening. You don't have to agree, but I do encourage you to study and, get my book. You can get it for $5 on your phone and you'll have all my research. And then you see something that you don't believe is true, then go do your own research. Everything that I have in the book is readily available. I didn't have to pay any money to get anything. All I did was do a lot of research and reading. And so you read my book. If I say something you don't know or can't verify with your own memory, then you just go study it for yourself and find out if that what I say is actually what it says,
Right. And from here, I'm definitely going to like look into hopefully all the things you said. I'm going to try to remember all of them, but like to see, if there's any sources for any characters, I'll say, in the Bible. But
Right.
can I ask you? Sorry, you're gonna go.
No, go ahead.
I'm gonna ask. So, for you, like your point of view of like the world and people, do you think it's healthier to So, would you be an atheist then?
Yeah.
Or okay. So, would you say that's like is your goal like maybe sharing this knowledge and maybe more people become atheists, like, or like do you think it's like a healthier way of having that mindset, living with that mindset, an atheistic?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I think realizing that there is no invisible man in the clouds that answers your prayers and is in control of all things. I believe it's healthier because it is reality. We know this is reality that Christians, the Christians even say God works in mysterious ways and he doesn't always give you what you ask for. And they're making excuses for why God doesn't heal the sick in prayer like he promised he would. And so instead of making excuses for why God doesn't do what he said he did, you can actually live in reality and say, I don't expect God to ever do anything. And if something's going to change, we're going to have to change it ourselves. And so this is why I titled this live Religion and Politics, because when I left religion, I realized I was never political, because when I was a Christian, I'm like, all I care about is taking care of my family and going to heaven. Well, when I realized that there is no heaven and that I still want to take care of my family, but I realized that this life is all I have. This life is all I'm promised. And this promise of eternal life in heaven is completely unreliable. I can't tell you that I know for certain that it won't happen, but I'm convinced that it won't because I know who made up the story and why they did. But I know we have this life now. And I believe that in order for us to unite and make the world a better place, we're going to have to realize that the Bible is fiction, that it's not true, and that it's actually been used and even intended to be used as a way to control and manipulate people for evil purposes.
I mean, I could definitely agree. It's been used to control and manipulate people, and for not good purposes either. And I would say because people have that, that evil in them, good and evil, whatever. But my bias is obviously towards Christianity. I'm a Christian, and I would hope that maybe one day you would find it again. Probably not, but and
But
after all that. But my
right, you
question
understand
is,
that I was a Christian. I
yes,
was
yes,
raised
yeah,
in a
yeah,
Christian house.
yes, yeah,
And
like
and
your whole life, right?
I became a Christian at the age of 16. I got baptized. I was driving myself to church every single time the doors opened, and I wasn't made to do it. It was my choice when I turned
Right.
16. And when I turned 46, this is when I said, I'm done with Christianity. I don't identify as a Christian anymore. So
Right.
for 30 straight years, I was believing and defending Christianity.
hmm And I say that because my final question will be: is there any possibility that, and I'm not just saying Christianity, it could be anything, but do you have, is there a possibility that maybe one day you might actually, like, you might believe in God again, or is that, do you think that's so, like, do you think if something
Well,
happens, like you see something, experience something, like, you know what I mean?
so I'll answer that question. I think it's a good question. But 2 years ago, I would have said there's no possibility that I could ever be an atheist. Somebody told me I was going to become an atheist. I said there's no possible way I could ever become an atheist.
Oh, wow.
And to be honest with you, I don't feel like I'm the best. You know, I'm not a true atheist. Some people say I'm not really a true atheist
It probably does.
because
Sorry.
because I mean, I say the biblical God does not exist. The Christian God does not exist. That's all
Okay.
mythology. But I can't explain life. I can't explain the origin of life. And I don't believe necessarily that it's just a natural process of Big Bang and evolution. But so even if there is a God, this God is actively hands off. He just says, all I wanted to do was create and just let y'all do whatever you want to do. I don't care how much evil takes place. I'm not listening to your
No
prayers.
miracles?
He's just like, no miracles, no supernatural
Okay.
events. It's just, I'm just here. I just created just to give y'all life.
Okay.
That's called deism. So I can't disprove deism,
Mhm.
which is a creator that just
And
is
you can't
invisible
prove
and
it,
hands
right?
off.
We can't
Oh.
prove it or disprove it.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
can disprove. I can disprove the biblical God. I can do that. And
And
I
I
think you
promise
asked
to
another
hopefully
thing.
one day
I
come
was gonna
back here
answer.
and I hope to
Oh,
one day come back here and look into all that and then be like, hey, what about this?
well, Sunshine. The question that you asked, is it possible I will ever believe in a God again?
Yeah.
So I told you that I could believe in this deist God that just creates and he's hands off. But the only way that I could believe in any, let's say the Christian God, the only way I could believe in the Christian God is if Jesus's promises were kept. Whoever believes in Jesus could drink poison and not be harmed, could handle serpents and get bit and not be harmed. They could go and lay their hands on the sick and be healed. If everybody who believed in Jesus could heal the sick, then I would instantly become a Christian, because then I would say there's power in the name of Jesus. But I believed in power in the name of Jesus for 40 years. You know, I go even beyond 30 years because I was a believing person in Jesus even before I was 16 years old. But I always made excuses for why there was no power in the name of Jesus, but I believed it anyway. Now I'm not interested in believing something that has no evidence. So you're going to have to provide evidence, such as healing the sick by touching them. And then I'll say, okay, I'll be a Christian. If there's power in the name of Jesus, then I'll be a Christian.
I respect
So
that.
yeah, all you got to do is go heal people in the hospital, and then I'm going to say I want to worship the same God that you worship.
Right. As long as you give me $1,000, I'll heal them. I'm kidding. That's usually what they
Oh.
say on those TV, whatever, the TV ads.
Well,
They used
you
to.
know what? Listen, if you could truly heal somebody, they would gladly pay you $1,000. They wouldn't even
Right.
begrudge it. If somebody had cancer and they were on their deathbed, they were in stage 4 pancreatic
$1 million,
cancer or
anything.
something like that.
Yeah.
If you came in and says, I will heal you for free, if you want to give me some money for my troubles afterwards, after I heal you, then I'll let you do that. But I'm going to do it for free. But if it works, then I will take a love offering. And if you healed them, I guarantee you they would gladly send you $1,000.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true.
I used to follow this great healing preacher called Benny Hinn. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yep.
him or not.
Everybody knows Benny Hinn.
His videos is what got me saved. I was watching his videos, and I ended up going to one of his conferences, one of his healing services he had. And I remember sitting in the pews seeing people wheeled in on hospital beds.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wow, these people's going to get healed. Not one person left walking out of those hospital beds. And I lost all faith in that man.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, this ain't like it is when I see it on TV.
Yeah, it's sad. All those.
So, Sunshine, I really appreciated your attitude. You asked questions, you listened, you responded, you didn't yell or get disrespectful. I don't like to yell and get disrespectful. I like to have good conversations like I had with you. So I appreciate you stopping by. If you go study something and you want to listen, I've got a Discord channel.
Mhm.
I've got a link tree in my TikTok profile. It's a
Yeah.
link tree in my profile. I've got Discord, I got a website, I got books, I've got YouTube channel. Everything is in my link tree. And you do not have to be an atheist to be my friend. I'll be your friend as long as you're respectful and kind. And you can ask me questions anytime. You can debate with me anytime if you want a respectful debate. Then it's open to you or anybody else in the comments. It's just an open invitation to join the Discord.
I thank you for having this conversation. You definitely made me think a lot. And also, I want to say too, you say things that nobody else I've never heard said, so it really made me wow, I didn't know that. So I want to look
Yeah.
into what you said, and hopefully I'll be back.
All right. Well, give
Have a
me
good
a
one.
follow so you can find me. I won't talk to you again in the
I think I
future.
follow you. Oh yeah, I follow you.
Bye.
Thank you guys.
All right. Thanks,
Have a
Sunshine.
good day.
You want me to bring
All
the
right.
next
Y'all
one
got?
up?
Yeah, you got it. It's all you. That's like the best guest ever.
That was pretty cool.
High on Fun Dip. Yeah.
Dogma, you're on the air.
They're not connected yet. They're still trying to connect.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey,
Yeah.
if Sunshine's still there, yeah, kudos, Sunshine. Unusual for somebody to be as open-minded and
Yeah, for real.
that was great. The only thing I wanted to add to the interpolations of Josephus was that one more piece of evidence is that Josephus was not a Christian. So anyone writing about a guy that could perform miracles and is amazing but didn't convert, that's a red flag right there. That's pretty
Yeah.
strange.
Well, and he also says that he fulfilled 10,000 Jewish prophecies. Josephus didn't think Jesus fulfilled 10,000 prophecies. In fact, Josephus in a later place says that Vespasian was the fulfillment of the Jewish messianic prophecies. So he said Vespasian was the Messiah.
Yep.
So, I thought you said Jesus was the Christ. He said he was the Christ. But then later on he says that Vespasian was the fulfillment, that he says the Jews thought it was about them, but they were fooled. It was really about Vespasian. And I think Josephus probably did write that because that fits in with what Josephus was doing. He was a Roman historian.
And in addition, I believe when historians look at Josephus, the language is off from the rest of it's clearly somebody else wrote it many
Right.
hundreds of years later.
Right.
That said, you were saying that you believe that the Romans promoted Christianity because of the idea that it said that the Messiah has already come, and that took away their ability to say that there's going to be a Messiah to challenge Rome. Is that what you were saying? Because I hadn't
Yeah.
heard that before, and that was so
Yes,
interesting.
yeah, something to that degree, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just curious what you base that on. I had not heard that before.
Well, I base it on the basic premise and the foundation that the Jewish concept of the Messiah was a military general that leads them to victory. And the basic concept of Christianity is the Jewish Messiah was just going to be a guy who came and got unalived by the Jews and said his kingdom was up in heaven. So it's just the basic understanding of what a Messiah was, the difference between the Jewish Messiah and the Christian Messiah. So who does it benefit? When the Jews want a military general to lead them to victory, but the Romans just want them to be peaceful and humble and obey, which is exactly what Jesus taught. Be peaceful. Let evil people slap you on the face. If somebody compels you to go 1 mile, go with them too. And this was and Paul, everything Paul says in the New Testament is that Judaism has passed away and that the Gentiles, now God has moved on to the Gentiles. The Gentiles were the Romans. He even writes a letter to the Romans. And in Philippians, he says, I think it's Philippians 2:44 or something, maybe 4:22. I think it's got 2s and 4s in it. That he says, those in Caesar's household greet you. I think it's Philippians 4:22. Those in Caesar's household greet you. So Paul is even saying, I'm familiar with those people that live in Caesar's household, and you Philippians over here, Rome sends you their greetings. 1 Peter 2:17 says, honor the emperor. So it's all throughout the Bible. The Bible openly says that it's pro-Roman and anti-Jewish. And the whole concept of a Messiah between Jewish concept and Roman concept or Christian concept are exactly opposite.
That's really interesting. So that, I mean, I've heard that Constantine did not convert. in a genuine way anyway, but that would call into question his conversion to Christianity as well, I would imagine.
Well, let me tell you something interesting I learned recently about Constantine. I was going to tell Sunshine, but he had to go or whatever. I think he's the guy that brought it up. You know, it's this universal notion that Constantine had a vision of Jesus to put crosses on his shields and to put crosses on their flag, you know, their banners and things like this, because Jesus told them they were going to win many victories under this sign. This is supposedly what happened. Well, Constantine authorized the construction of the Arch of Constantine. Constantine himself built it for himself. He didn't build it. He said, "Build me an arch," just like Titus's arch. In fact, it's right next to it. The Arch of Titus is here, overlooking the Colosseum in Rome. And Constantine said, who also adopted the name Flavius Constantine, he's putting his arch right next to Flavius Titus and Flavius Vespasian and Flavius Domitian, because Domitian built some kind of water fountain or something there for himself. So you have Constantine building the Arch of Constantine in the exact same colonnade or block of Rome that the Flavians built their monumental constructions, and there's not a single Christian symbol anywhere on the Arch of Constantine. Not a single one. They have shields on the arch. There are soldiers carrying shields on the Arch of Constantine, but they don't have crosses on it.
Does that call into question the whole idea of Constantine and his vision of putting crosses? Are you saying that might have been added later as well?
Well, I believe, as I currently stand, I believe that Constantine did want to push Christianity on the world, but not because he believed it, but because it was a good tool to control people. But so this story that he had a vision of Jesus to put crosses, that didn't happen. That was a story that was added later, completely after the war, after Constantine has power, and he says, "How can I control the people?" They say, "Look, this Christian thing has been building and developing over the last 200 years, 300 years. This is a pretty cool way. Why don't you just, adopt this religion, which is actually a secret way to worship the Roman emperors, because it was originally designed to worship the emperors. Jesus saying, 'Render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God.'" And Jesus actually represents Titus, the Son of God. Every time Jesus calls himself the Son of Man in the New Testament, which is what he most often called himself, back when I was a Christian, I said, why is Jesus always calling himself the Son of Man? Why don't he call himself the Son of God? He wasn't the Son of Man. He was the Son of God. Well, now I know why he did it. It's because the Son of Man is a reference to Titus, who was the son of Vespasian, who was deified later, and he later became the Son of God. So when Vespasian was deified, so this is why the book of Acts, I think it is, that says Jesus became the Son of God at the resurrection. So he didn't start out as the Son of God. He became the Son of God. This is the same thing that Titus did. Titus started out as a son of man, but then after Vespasian died, they deified Vespasian, and then Titus became the Son of God. It's like a resurrection. There's a whole bunch of, even Romulus, who was the person who supposedly founded Rome. It's called the apotheosis of Romulus or something. He was resurrected from the dead and sat at the right hand of God. So this was a common theme throughout their mythologies and their deifications of Caesars, is that you could be a man while you're on earth, but when you die, you get deified. You become the Son of God at that point. And so this is what all that language is about in the New Testament. Jesus returning to bring the vengeance of God on the Jews was actually Titus coming in the glory of Vespasian and with his holy angels were the Roman army to destroy the Jews in Jerusalem. The whole, everything about it.
Fascinating, man. I have to jump, but I was just curious if you've read Richard Carrier's Jesus Mything in Action.
I haven't read that one. I read one of Richard Carrier's books. I think it's Why I'm Not a Christian. I think Richard Carrier wrote a book called Why I'm Not a Christian.
Uh-huh.
And when I read it, it didn't tell me what I was expecting to hear. I can't remember what he went into now, but I was like, okay, that was interesting, but it's not what I was expecting. Uh,
Yeah, he
that's the
has one
only
that
book I've read of
I think
his.
I think it's called Mything in Action. I can't be sure, but that one is where he makes the case that Jesus never existed. So
Well, I know Richard Carrier is famous for his book called On the Historicity of Jesus.
yeah,
And this is the book that I know he makes the case that Jesus never existed, that he was
that might be the
not a
one I'm
historical
thinking of.
character.
Yeah, that might be what I'm
Maybe
thinking of.
Mything in Action is somebody else's book.
It might be
Maybe,
somebody else. I might be confused. Either way,
but Historicity of Jesus is Richard Carrier.
there you go. Either way, I've given you a follow. I think you're really informative. I enjoyed the conversation, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks for stopping in.
You
Two
bet.
good guests in a row.
Somebody in the comments says that there's 100 ancient coins with an eagle on it, that they're Jesus coins. I'm like, no, they are not Jesus coins.
Jesus was not an eagle. The eagle was the symbol of Rome. So if you see an eagle on a coin, it's for Rome, most likely. Are y'all pulling up the next one?
Oh, I can't.
I got him bronze stick. I got him. I think he's the only one in there.
Hey, good evening.
Hey, good evening.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Hey, so I just wanted to commend you on your departure from your own personal experience of indoctrination in Christianity, and not because of your specific experience with Christianity, because I think, I think anybody who has enough courage to step outside of the indoctrination of any religion influence, particularly one that's, ones that are kind of hammered home, when we're in our youths, which was for me too, I think deserves a lot of credit. And I say that because, I am actually a member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation in our country, and would be considered a free thinker, if you want to call it that. I try to
That's
stay away
pretty
from,
cool. I like
yeah,
that.
yeah, isn't that cool? I try to stay away from labeling others as well as labeling myself, but at some point you do have to kind of identify to some degree with the tribe that you currently think you're in, right?
Yeah. I think
And
I think labels are useful, even though you say I don't totally agree with everything, but I think it helps people at least understand, something about you if you put yourself in with some
no,
sort of label.
exactly right. Yeah, well, I mean, look, the English language is or any learned language is a great communicator, right? So if we were to just sit here with clubs and grunt, it might be a little bit difficult to have a conversation. So yeah, no, absolutely. But I just wanted to commend you because I think that it takes a lot of courage to do that. I did that many years ago, and I'm a big Carl Sagan fan. I lean more into the sciences of and the curiosity of our relationship as humans to the universe. And I really don't. I don't really have much experience. It's much more your lane, I think, as a curious person in terms of trying to establish or deconstruct, I guess, and then try and find how you relate to the experience of Christianity. I gave that up many years ago just because it's not even entertaining to me anymore, period. Nor do I really even want to have conversations with people who might be combative about what they believe relative to what I believe, because really the only thing that I can answer, in relation to that is that, is us coming to an understanding of what we think about God going to do anything with between us as human beings and or our personal relationship? And in my opinion, no, not unless someone wants to make it a problem. But what's fascinating is that, there's a deep curiosity, I think, that all human beings have for, knowing our origins. But I think it's kind of a waste of time to spend a lot of time trying to figure that out. I'm much more interested in the awe and curiosity of it than I am, making it have it make me miserable in a pursuit of it. And that it's just that simple. I can tell you that personally, the freedoms that have come emotionally and just in my life from being able to step outside of that have been immense. And I really truly enjoy it. And I, at the risk of sounding a little metaphysical, which I'm typically not, I believe I find my own truths that way. It's a much more personal experience, and I don't have to convince anybody of anything. My happiness is really a product of living a more personal experience that way, and then my perspective is that too. My wife and I spent years just we couldn't get enough of Brian Cox and Neil deGrasse and Carl Sagan, so it just there's just been a wonderful curious exploration of that. And
Well,
I want to
uh,
mention one more thing
go
because
ahead.
I heard you defining and describing these different in context these different ideas of being an agnostic or an atheist or a theist or whatever category I guess anybody feels they're in. But I've kind of actually gravitated more towards the idea that agnosticism probably fits me better only for one reason, and that is this. I think it's pretty commonly accepted, even with much of the sciences, that obviously something created this, whether or not it's something that's greater than ourselves, no one really knows. But at the end of the day, I think the modern conversation that most people debate and are having today in our lives on this planet as we speak is more about whether people feel the need to have a personal relationship with this acceptance that there's a creator. I'm agnostic. I think something created it, but I definitely am not convinced that it's some big bearded guy in the sky or that we need to have a personal relationship with it. And looking back in our own American history, you can see that many of our founders were deists. They did believe that something created this, but they truly did feel that it had anything to do with our day-to-day living. Nothing, nada.
Right. So that's what I say. I say that I don't know how we got here. But for me, what I can prove is that the Bible is not reliable. I can prove the Bible is full of errors, lies, contradictions, evil, inconsistencies, and I say the Bible is not true. I can prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt. If you say, is it possible there's some supernatural being outside of space and time? I guess, but I can't. If it's outside of space, time, and matter, then it's outside of our comprehension. We can't understand it,
Yep.
and whatever it does, we can't even test it. We can't even. And this is part of how we can prove the Bible is false, because the Bible says that you can pray to this God and he will send fire from heaven to burn up an altar, or he can part Red Sea so you can walk across, and you can heal the sick and all this stuff. So that stuff doesn't happen. So we know that the Bible is not trustworthy or true. But so if there is a God, the deist God is the only one that could exist. And which means, but I think that's even an irrational conclusion to make, because just because you don't know the answer to a question, you don't get to create some illogical supernatural hero to answer the question that you don't know. Back in the first century or before, in the Roman Empire and especially in the Greek Empire, people thought that whenever it lightened, it was a god named Zeus who was throwing lightning bolts on the earth. Well, now that we know that how lightning is generated, and with the friction and moisture in the air and all this stuff, we no longer believe in Zeus. We don't think that there's a god throwing lightning on the earth. We know that lightning is a natural process that we can predict and understand how it works.
Right.
So this deist God, this invisible, illogical being, is simply the answer to I don't know how we got here. And so I believe maybe at some point in our history, in our future, we're going to come up with a valid excuse or explanation, not an excuse, but an explanation that is justified through scientific processes of how life could have begun, and we can duplicate it or something, even on a small scale. Then this idea of a creator God will completely disappear at that point.
Well, I'm
And so you said
definitely
something.
inclined to agree with you. Yeah, and then the reason why is because I think that for me in the sciences, it gets down to one thing. If you have an extraordinary claim requires extraordinary evidence, and we just have not seen any evidence of that. So when I say agnostic, what I mean is that it's the acknowledgement that we just don't know. Does that mean that I believe
Well,
that a God
but I
created?
wanted
I mean, God's just a label, really. I mean, at the
right.
end of
I
the day.
wanted to address that because I find the term agnostic to be completely redundant and useless to say, because Every person is an agnostic. Every Christian is agnostic. They believe in the Christian God, but they are agnostic about it, even if they won't admit it, because you can't know that your God is real, especially when he doesn't keep his promises. Like, they say God works in mysterious ways. That's essentially an acknowledgement to acknowledge agnosticism, because they're saying, I don't know why God allows evil in the world. I don't know why God doesn't answer prayers. I don't know why God doesn't reveal himself to everybody. So they're admitting to being agnostic. That's what agnostic means. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
So
interesting. It's interesting that I like that perception actually, because it just broadens out my idea. Like I said, Christianity is not my lane. Most religions aren't my lane, only because I just don't pursue. I don't pursue answers for me, or even the exploration of, like I said, our relationship as humans to the universe through those prisms. They don't interest me at all. Period. I mean,
but you
I
did
just
it
don't.
one time though, right?
Yeah, actually, I was
You
raised
were,
Protestant as a child, yes. But
yeah.
I can't say that I ever connected in any sort of an emotional way that that there were any examples that led me to feel like that was something I wanted to pursue. Eventually, for me, it just I don't really even know where it happened, but there was just a point at which I think I just started asking myself some broader questions about what I was seeing with religion, what my personal relationship was, with the rest of the world and the universe, and science seemed to be a stronger set of cases for me to not explain our origins, but explain much of what we're actually seeing in terms
Right.
of real and evidence. And
Well,
so,
so let me give you another example that I think is pretty ingenious, that I feel like I came up with myself. Uh, people say you can't have a creation without a creator. You can't have a painter without a painter. You can't have a building without a builder. And but when we see a tree, we don't assume that somebody created the tree. When we see a tree, we say, well, there was a seed that fell in the ground, and through natural processes of sun and rain and soil, and whatever the DNA of the tree seed is, that's what caused the tree to grow. So whenever you have unnatural things like a painting or a building or a creation or like a sandcastle, you know that somebody built those things because they're unnatural. But they're to assume that natural things require a creator is a baseless assumption. There is no creator required for a tree to produce another tree. All it's got to do is drop a seed out of the wherever seeds come from, and let it hit the ground and have the right conditions for it to grow, and we can reproduce it over. In fact, we do. We grow plants and sell them at nurseries because we know how to naturally grow more plants.
yeah,
But
well, I guess what's interesting, because I think that, in a sense, you're covering some kind of basic concepts. Carl Sagan, admittedly says, well, if you believe that the laws of nature are God, well, then I guess I believe in God. So what he's saying
right,
is that, he believes in the laws of nature, and I do too. But I guess what's interesting is it does ask the question, where did the laws of nature come from? So there's always kind of an origin to an origin, and I think people could literally spend their lives trying to understand or figure that out. That's not important to me. I think it's kind of it's kind of a mute point, because we have to get up and live every day, and that's the most
right.
important
Let
thing.
let me say something else in response to what you just said. So you said, where do the laws of nature come from? Science is the observation of nature, and
Right?
the laws of nature and the laws of logic, they are descriptive, not prescriptive, which means we establish the laws of logic and reason and morality and nature by observing the way things are, and then saying, even mathematics is descriptive, not prescriptive. God didn't say 2 plus 2 is 4. Humans said, well, when you have, let's say 1 plus 1 is 2. Humans said, well, I've got one apple here. I've got another apple here. Let's say we have 2 apples now. So when you hold one apple and we'll say 1 plus 1 is 2. So nature says when you duplicate the same thing, you have double the amount. But when we use language that says we just doubled the amount, we're describing what we observe to be true. And so all these things, logic, mathematics, morality, and nature, they are simply descriptive. They describe what we see over and over. It doesn't require a designer
Right.
or a creator
No, that's right.
of
I would agree with that.
mathematics.
Totally. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. That's eloquently said. And I think that I believed those same things, but because I don't really engage with, maybe other than my wife, in these types of conversations, we're really not kind of sorting out the reasoning behind it, other than we've just pretty simply concluded that trying to enjoy life and enjoy our perception of this world is better suited for us through not being driven down that rabbit hole of all these dogmatic religions, because obviously, like you found out, that they didn't work for you, and they certainly didn't work for me. So
And let me, you may remind me of something else. So I think you said something earlier about finding your truth or what's important to you or something like that. And you just said something
yeah,
right then that reminded me of it.
yeah,
You see, what I'm concerned about is what is true for everybody. And, I'm looking for what is true for my own purposes and for my children. I try to help them to understand what is true going forward. But I believe all humanity deserves to know what is universally true. Not what just is subjectively true for a group of individuals who get together on Sunday morning and tell each other that there's a man in the sky that listens to your prayers. That's their truth. That's their opinion. That's their subjective reality. It's not objective reality, though. And so I think it's important that humans understand the difference between subjective reality and objective reality. And so I'm looking for things that are universally true for all people. And so if somebody says, God came to me in a dream, I say, well, God doesn't come to me in dreams. He hasn't come to millions of other people in dreams. So that's your subjective response. And that is not reliable for objective truth. Because, somebody could say, I have somebody telling me that I need to go to college campuses and pick up girls against their will and take them back to my place and then drop their bodies off in a ditch somewhere. And then, that's not good. So I want to talk to other people. This is why I'm here. This is why I have TikTok, is because I believe I have the right motivations to search for what is true, objectively true. And I want to help other people be able to find out what is objectively true, universally true for all people.
I think
you say,
that's a
go
wonderful
ahead.
effort, and I would commend that, because I think that many people, including me, pretty much accept that people's desire to live life is a very personal affair, and not that there shouldn't be people that are willing to put themselves out there and expose whatever those beliefs are. I think that's a healthy thing. But I'm not the kind of person that would feel I would have to proselytize my truths, because you're not going to convince anybody of anything they don't want to know. I mean, it's that simple.
Correct. And I'm not trying to convince people to believe what I believe, but I do think that anybody who wants to know the truth should be able to benefit from what I'm searching for and what I find.
Sure.
So it's
Oh,
like
yeah,
it's
sure.
a free country. If you don't want to hear what I have to say, by all means,
Totally.
leave. But
Totally. Yeah.
I want everybody to understand that I'm looking for objective, universal, undeniable truth, and I will help you come to these conclusions because I can disprove things that are not universally true. So
Yeah. Well, I
that's
mean,
what I do.
clearly your lane is Christianity, no doubt about it. And
Correct.
I mean, like I said, for me, my history in Christianity is why I'm sorry for laughing, is watching some stereotypical Hollywood movie that defines Ben-Hur. I mean, come on, I just don't, I left that many years ago and don't feel I have to try to define that for others. But I think it's wonderful what you're doing. I commend you, and recommend you highly. Keep it up, and just know you got others out there that have taken the courageous leap into a broad, what I would call a broader self-discovery, and maybe something that might be a little bit more, I don't know, grounded, in our pursuit to have a better understanding of our other human beings and our relationship to the universe. So I think it's just wonderful. I'm impressed. Not many on TikTok like you. Let's put it that way.
I think you're correct. I'm a pretty awesome dude, so glad you see it.
I have no doubt. I have no doubt that we could spend a lot of time having a cup of coffee in the morning anywhere in this wonderful world or country. So, good luck, my friend, and carry on.
Thanks for stopping in.
You bet. Take care.
So the next guest requesting to come up is one of my friends.
All right. Well, you may talk. Go ahead and talk to him for a second. I'm going to take a little mini break, but I'll be here.
Hi, Dwayne. Dwayne, did you request up?
I did it by accident.
Oh, man. Okay.
Yeah, I must have did it by accident. Yeah, I'll drop, but I'll be listening.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So let's get these shares up to at least 20, you guys, and let's get the likes up to at least 20 to 25,000. It's been a very good conversation so far tonight. Anybody else want to request? Hit the little multi-guest button at the bottom and you can come up and speak. And you can hang out with me and Kim.
I actually think what I want to do is I want to close this live and restart a new one because this one has been so good. I want to put it on YouTube and I don't want it to get 4 or 5 hours long. So I'm just going to shut it down and restart again. So y'all make sure you're following so you can join the new
Okay.
live. It'll get us a new crowd of people as well. And it'll be easier to put it on YouTube.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Be back in a second.